Welcome, friends. One of my things that I love most about DMM that's been most challenging for me, I think, just in ministry and just being a Jesus follower, is the idea that we look back before we look forward. And right, it's really easy to just have a good discussion and then next week move on to the next thing. But so that's a core thing, right? If we actually obeying, and we just came out of a really powerful series. I took so many notes, and man, I got to apply so much stuff we learned from talking about push weeks. And thanks for the 37 people that helped teach this last series. You guys did an awesome job. And so we're going to start a series in a couple of minutes talking about, hey, how do I build teams? Or if that's already happening and doing this in community where you're at, how do I multiply teams? But I want us to look back first and just ask the question, and I'm going to give some time specifically to some of the stuff that happened in Ithaca of, hey, what were our big takeaways from what we already did? Because I think there's a danger that we can simply go, hey, we just get new content, we're challenged by it, and then we do nothing about it. And then, oh, here comes Jim with now a new series with some new stuff, and to get overwhelmed. And we really want to just stop and encourage one another. And we for sure do that already in our breakout groups, but want to be able to, as a big community as well, to celebrate what are some of the steps that we're taking. And some leaders, we were talking yesterday, and we said, it's not so much that we're saying, hey, what is said in this call is thus saith the Lord at all, but more the idea as things are introduced in our coaching call, that the application should always be for us to go, okay, God, what would you have me do with that? How do I apply that to my life? And then as God speaks to you, hey, then you're called to obey that. And so as we talked about push weeks, hey, we all know we were praying for what was going on in Ithaca, New York. And I've asked John to share a little bit of what happened there this past week. And then I want to give a heads up for people as well. Then I'd love a bunch of it can be really 15 to 20 seconds, real brief. But are there some other things that people took that weren't in New York, but are going, hey, because of this past series, here's what we're doing. For example, hey, I'm going to be flying to this city later in the year and going and being a part of this push week. Or, hey, we're going to be leading our first push week or our next one because of the series later on in the year. And just if there's several quick answers, I want us to be encouraged by that, because the challenge from this last series was, hey, either to, lead a push week in your area or join one somewhere else. And I want to, even in our breakout groups, hey, before you go forward and stuff we talk about today, to really make sure, hey, has everybody got an answer to one of those two things? As we're seeking to see 1 million people in 2028 and multiplying movements. So all that to say, hey, John Murray, are you around here? There you are. Will you share with us a little bit about what happened this last week? We all want to hear. And you're on mute.
Can I share my screen or no?
You have my permission. I don't know if
I'm asking
the technical abilities.
Can I do that?
Susie will have to make you a co-host, John, and then you'll be able to, no problem.
I just turned it on so you could, I turned it on.
Okay.
There it is.
You see that photo?
Yes.
Yeah. So anyways, we had an amazing weekend. Brent and Heather Huffin were with us, with Kathy and I. And we had 103 people that gathered at the Ithaca Downtown Marriott Hotel. And at the same time, there was the Ithaca Harvest going on. We were Ithaca Festival, where about 30,000 people come to Ithaca over a 4-day period of time. And so one floor down and right out the door was the harvest field. And I thought it was amazing because it was such a great group of people. We 7 states, 73 adults, 12 teens, 18 kids. There were 10 people connected with the Experience Life group. We had a lot of people from Rochester. I think it was like 25 or so. And a guy by the name of Jack Worthington, who started the churches at RIT. They were with us. The Amish that have converted to Christianity from Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. We had about 15 people there. That's created a bit of a movement. And so what we did the first night and the first morning were people shared stories. We shared the story about what's going on in Ithaca. And let me see, I think Jack shared his story with RIT in Rochester. Jonas Kurtz shared the story of the Amish, this what they call the Johnsonburg revival these Amish people that began to come to Jesus that he's a part of. Brent shared the Pacific Northwest story and what's happened there. Adam, who's on here right now, Adam shared a great story. And I think the greatest thing that Adam did was he brought his story with him, because he had 8 young men who have all, I think this is true, Adam, you can correct me, but I think 8 young men between 15 and 20 that have all become Christ followers and been baptized. And these guys were amazing. They left an impression on all of us. And so Adam shared his story, and then a young man that is going to be graduating from RIT that met the Lord as a result of Jack's ministry is going to start a group in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. We had Eric Isabel, who is with our Experience Life group. He's in a different session, but he was there from Philadelphia. Jim Thurber was there. And so we did things like we learned and practiced tools, SOS, sayings, obeying, sharing, very similar to what we do with the DBS, conversation quadrant. Brent talked about that. Jim did his walk, talk, story, Bible storytelling exercise. We had one of the guys from the Amish community did his 15-second testimony. And then probably the one that was the most popular, if I can stop and just share a different screen, was this one. Oh, wait a minute. You see that? So many of you may be familiar with this, but some people weren't. And the gal that shared how she's using this from Ford Drum was amazing. And a little bit of it was a play off of Brent had said, hey, sometimes you need to not go for the carotid. And she got up and she said, I go for the carotid. Here's what she said, this is what happened to me, and this is what I do. And she shared how she uses the Two Kingdoms story to share the gospel on the streets. And it was just, I think what was really cool was everybody, sort of crossing lines, different movements, the No Place Left Behind. A lot of people from that were there, people from our group. And so it was, Jack shared the Seed Sower app, which is an app they use to track gospel shares and map what's happening, which was cool. So, and then we went out 2 by 2 into the festival. I think there were a lot of great conversations out there, people praying for people. I think we had about 40 pairs of people that left to do that. And then we watched the Witnessing a Movement video from India. And I think that was a game changer for a lot of the people that had never seen anything like that. I mean, they were in the hallways downstairs talking to Brett, trying to figure out how does that happen? Well, we just witnessed. How do we get there? Because these I would say that 70% of the people were between the ages of 15 and 35. And it was really encouraging, I know, to me, as a 60-some-year-old person, to see the next generation. And I think Kathy and I really wanted this to be a situation in which we were movement servants, investing in what's these young people. And I'm not sure if Brent, if you have anything to add, or I don't know if I've used my time. Jim, you can tell me.
The only thing I'd add is just a shout out to John and Kathy, because they served well, and everybody who joined from the E-Life crew stepped in, and we just went along with so many people from so many different tribes within the disciple making world. And man, the zeal of the young people, praise God for all the young people who are catching the vision for disciple making and living it out. And then sometime in the weeks ahead, we're going to make Adam share his story of obedience, because it's so powerful.
John, this is awesome. I would ask, is there one specific story that comes to mind of like someone that you guys met on the trip that's, potential person of peace we'd hear from it, or anything come to mind, you or Brent or Kathy?
I don't know about meeting somebody as a potential person of peace when we went out, but I will say that we had one of the really cool things was we had people just show up that weren't even registered. And we had this one young guy showed up from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I was starting to try to figure out, who is this guy? And he looked like Lonnie Frisbee from the Jesus Revolution movie, had long hair, he had his t-shirt on, said Jesus. And I'm like, so I'm like, are you like registered? And I no. And I'm like, do you have a place to stay? And he's like, no, I can find one though. And so I put him, this young guy, this young Lonnie Frisbee with Jim Thurber. Because I knew that Jim had an extra sleeping sort of bed, a couch bed in his room, and I thought that was the perfect pairing to put him with Jim. Is this young zealot that again we had 3 people that just showed up and said, we heard about this and we want to be here.
Yeah, and I'll just real quick, Jim or the Fort Drum guys were out with 2 people, and each of them led somebody to Jesus when they were having a spiritual conversation. And they got their phone numbers, and everybody's following up with their own people and before we pass it off to the local team. So that was very encouraging. And 23 people shared the gospel with somebody for the first time in their life.
So cool.
That's very encouraging.
Well, praise God, guys. Thanks for sharing. And I felt like we've talked a lot about being family together, but it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to feel it. And I felt it a lot this last week because you guys, at least for me, were on my mind a lot this past week. And because we've been saying this thing, once again, it's easy to say, but it's bigger when we're actually feeling it and doing it, is, hey, everyone's stories is everybody's stories. And going, any story that happens in New York is actually part of my story, right? And if we're all in on this thing of seeing 1 million by 2028 and multiplying movements, well then, man, New York is a key part of that. And all the different things that are going on and the stories that we share are part of that. And so anyways, thanks guys for modeling that and obedience, and man, giving us just a great example. So, and what a great application to this last series that we just did. Real quick, before I dive into some new things, I'm not looking for long stories, really just like a sentence or two. But before we move on from the Push Week series, any applications people are taking in their areas that maybe you've shared in your breakout group, but it'd be good for us just to hear here. And it doesn't have to be even super articulated, like you have the exact dates, but just some beginning forming ideas. I think that'd be really helpful for us. So anyone got some quick things to share? I think everyone has the ability to unmute for the next minute.
Hey, we're in North San Diego County. We're excited. We've got a Push Week set up for mid-September. It was great when our whole group was out here last year, and we went out in our neighborhood, and we're looking forward to mid-September.
Cool. Awesome.
We set up a Zoom meeting last week and discussed it across our Texas folk, and they selected to come to Waco the last weekend in September. So we're going to do something here in Waco. So we're excited about that. And the interesting thing is, because I knew that was coming, some of my folks that have been kind of a little on the fence or in and out, that kind of thing, I've been reaching out to them and they're kind of excited, and they're putting it on their calendar now. They're blocking out those days. So that was good from a vision casting standpoint as well.
Praise God. Thanks, Grace. That's awesome.
Yes, we are looking at a push event here in the Richmond area. I talked with Pastor Holback, who's in the Monday group, and we were beginning to lay plans. Things are not solidly in place yet, but the excitement is there, and we're putting it before God to see, is this the right time? And how do we prepare for it? And how do we execute it? How do we follow it up? And John, it was great to be there in Ithaca, as well as with Matt and Susie, and then with you, Jim, out in Oceanside, to see how you carried off the push time. Good modeling for the rest of us.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim.
I just want to speak for the people up here in British Columbia, Canada, where Tim Clausen, Mary Charlotte, and Pam and I are brainstorming at the moment to target October, which would be a strategic time for our island here, and probably working with where Tim is living on the island next door. So we're tentatively getting that date together now, and I think there's a real excitement about actually committing and doing something together, actually, between these two islands.
Awesome, Barb. That's great.
We're in the north of the UK, and we're going to have a push event in July with Faye, who's in Leeds, and we're in Bradford. So you're all really welcome to come and join us.
I'll fit in with all the other Brits. It's great.
In the Northeast, our goal is quarterly. And so we just did Ithaca, obviously, this last weekend. And then we've got scheduled for Rochester Labor Day weekend. And then we just kind of rotate cities each time.
Hey, Brent, if you're not writing this down, you probably should write these things down.
I'm typing as fast as I can.
Okay, good. Hey, any others of things coming up? This is great.
Yeah, here in North Central Ohio, our network of simple churches, we do a push day once a month. And in the fall, we're looking at doing a weekend. So we've been doing one day, but looking at doing a weekend in the fall.
Awesome. That's great, Jordan.
Yes, I appreciate Jordan saying that. I'm trying to do multiple pushes each week, and asking the group to pray that there will be people who will join me. I can take them out, work with them, get rid of their fear, do some training, and also prepare for the push that's coming either in August or September throughout Richmond.
That's great.
I just have a new personal push, Jim. Every day I want, like, we go out to the university Tuesday, but I want to pray with somebody every day, even if I'm by myself, and get to the gospel. So that's been awesome because of this training here.
Cool. I know our breakout group was talking a bunch with Rob Jenin, who I don't think he's on yet today, but working on a Birmingham, Alabama push weekend coming up here soon as well. So I'll report for him. Hey, this is exciting. So so much going on with this. And I would say too, if you're going, I don't know yet today, but in the coming weeks, hey, let one of your breakout leader know. And I mean, it's kind of a commercial, right, as well. Like as you're sharing, hey, we're gonna do a push week. People in our group might go, hey, we want to come and join you in that. And so I'm just saying, no, like under the radar push weeks allowed. Okay. Like you gotta let us know so that potentially people can come join you and what's going on. So that's great news of putting into practice what we've learned so far. And maybe you still need to process through some of that stuff. Continue doing that. This next series, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna, the goal will be really, really practical, talking about, hey, how do we do this in community in our local places, and maybe even as a big group together as well. And I want to start by just sharing a story. And then the rest of the series, we're going to do a lot of some how-to, some real practical of like building teams, or maybe you've already got that, how to multiply teams. But today, then I'm going to talk just a couple minutes about the why. And the why already, I don't think there's anybody here going, oh, doing this with other people? I never thought about that. That's brilliant. No, like we already know that. But my hope would be from today, just for a couple minutes, that maybe that would even be intensified, the importance of doing this in community with others. And if you're alone, or you've got one team, but thinking, hey, that's all I need, that this will become even a greater passion and priority in terms of how do we raise up more people to do this together. But here's a story from yesterday. So we've got a crew that usually on Tuesday afternoons, we go prayer walking, and we'll pick a neighborhood for a season that we're in. And we're in an apartment complex that we did this actually a couple of years ago early on, and we got kicked out of it. It's the first time we're going back to one that we got kicked out on. And as I was actually on a Zoom call with several people that are in our area, but aren't all like right in the same area. They weren't all going to go prayer walking, but we meet on Tuesdays at 3, and we just kind of check in, kind of like our breakout groups here. And as I was walking to the spot where I was going to meet several of the people to prayer walk, my Zoom was on my phone, was on really low. And I've never had this before. Maybe someone who's smarter than me with science could explain it, but that would mess it all up. As I'm like, kind of like straining to hear this, and I had on low, just so it wasn't obnoxious as I'm walking down this sidewalk, I could hear the last person was praying for me, and I could hear every word they were saying. And somehow from my little phone on low volume was bouncing off the walls of the apartment complex on the other side and echoing really, really loudly. I'm like, what am I hearing? And I put my phone down so I couldn't even hear it from the phone. And I could hear the whole prayer like loudly from across the street going off this wall. And so after they said amen, I said, hey, that's weird, but I've never heard that. That's never happened to me before. And then we gathered together. There was just 5 of us prayer walking, and 2 people, one of them was there for the first time ever. And I shared that. And we've been kind of mostly working systematically through this complex. But I said, hey, it was bouncing off this specific wall and we hadn't been there yet. Might God be saying something through that? I don't know. But I want to, like, when in doubt, step in by faith and go, maybe God, you're saying something. Because I've never had to, like, anyways, that kind of echo happened. So they said, yeah, let's do it. So we go for there. And we started not on that exact wall, but near there, and some really cool things were going on. But then when we get to that exact place where it was across the street, and I'm with someone who's never prayer walked before, and we knock on the door, and it's a young Navy woman, and she says, "Yeah, I'd love prayer. My husband's in the Navy as well, and he's somewhere else in the country. And in our first year and a half of marriage, we've never got to live in the same place, and we're trying to make that work, and it's difficult. On top of that, we're trying to figure out how God fits into this whole thing." She said, "I've never really had much of a faith background before. My husband has a little bit. Oh, and by the way, I was talking on FaceTime when you guys walked in. Here he is." And so he's like listening to the whole thing. And I said, "No way. Well, that's cool." And met him and said, "Hey, can we just share a story with you that I think would encourage you?" And I shared the story of Jesus walking on water, and just the idea of they're walking through stuff. If their eyes were on Jesus, that would impact them. And I share it. And I go, "What do you learn from that story that would have any application to what you're going through?" And the guy, at first, I thought was a little bit rude. On the FaceTime, he speaks back and says, "Well, can I share a story with you?" I thought, okay. And the story he shared was, he said, "Yesterday we were talking, and my wife, who was there with us, she said, 'How do you know that God's speaking to you or that God's in the middle of something? I don't get any of that stuff.'" And he said, "My answer was really pretty low quality." He said, "I don't know. You just know because it's something that never would have happened apart from God." And he said, and he turns to his wife, like, from the phone to her, we're all live. And he goes, "Is this good enough for you?" As we're standing there at the door. And she's like, "Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. God has answered our prayer from yesterday." And so we're like working through that. She's like, "This is amazing. Yeah, tell us what to do." And I go, "I wasn't going to share this with anybody, but this is kind of weird." And I tell him the echo story. I go, "We weren't even supposed to be here at this building. But I felt like God led us because things bounced off the wall." And they're like, "This is unbelievable. Okay, so what do we need to do? We want to learn about God. Would you tell us?" And I exchanged numbers. I was with this woman who was prayer walking for the first time. She exchanged numbers with the woman. I with this guy who's not even in the area. We've already gone back and forth, and they're really interested in learning and growing and sharing this with other people. The very next door, this is part of the same building. Knock on a door. Woman opens it. Her name's Jessie. She says, "Hey, I grew up in a really, really bad childhood, just horrible stuff. And because of that, I've never had," she used the word religion, "no religion in my life. It didn't make sense to me with all the horrible things I went through. But I've got a 10-year-old now, and he's asking me lots of questions about God. And my husband and I have been asking, well, what do we do about that? How do we tell him about God when we don't really have much of a background ourselves?" And she said, "We were talking about that last night, and you just knocked on the door. Will you show us how?" So we exchanged numbers with Jessie, and she's excited now about learning how they as a family can start growing in their faith. And so anyways, we walk away, and I just want to say this. If it was just me doing that by myself, that would still be a great story. But here was maybe the coolest part of the whole thing, and the whole thing was cool. I'm walking away with this woman named Shannon who'd never prayer walked before, and she turns to me and goes, "That was incredible. Is it like that every time?" And just to say, isn't it true? If we're living out the principles that we're learning here with others, it makes it way better. Isn't that true? And when we got back and shared stories with all of us as a group, and they all had stories as well of what had happened, it was clear God wanted us to be in that section of this apartment complex. Man, there was just a sense of celebration in that. And so we're in the next couple of weeks just talking about, hey, how do we do this more in community? And maybe some of you guys are like, "Jim, you're speaking to the choir. Man, I feel like I'm doing this by myself. I want to do this with others." And it's just not so easy to get people together. And so we're going to talk through that how in some future weeks, and not just me. Several people are going to be involved in helping bring this together. But I want to just, we probably already get this, but I want to walk through 5 why answers. This is so key for us that we got to do this in community. And if you're feeling like, hey, it's just me or just me and someone else, hey, why? Hey, it's so important that you've got some partners in this. And I want to say, if you're feeling alone right now, I've been there. I remember maybe about a year into doing DMM and was trying to form, while I was leading my legacy church, a gathering that would come together. I remember one week we're meeting at a park and doing our church there. We had lots of forms of what disciple making community looked like. There was one week and it was just me and my family. I remember thinking, I have scared away my whole church and everybody who wants to do this. Oh my goodness. And I remember I turned to my wife and said, this was kind of my greatest fear. Like, what do we do now? And she said, well, Jim, I think you just get it together and you lead us in a discovery Bible study. If this is what God's called us to do, don't we do it as a family? And all of a sudden that fear was gone. Like, oh, yeah, I guess if we have us, like she's not going anywhere. All right, we keep on going. So I think it's good to go, hey, I'm in, whether yet none go with me, I still will follow. But man, it's better to do it with other people. And so hopefully in this series, maybe we'll walk through some tools on how to do that. So anyways, 5 things, 5 whys I think would be huge. And you probably could write these down already. These are a firm grasp of the obvious, but I want us to be on a firm foundation as we go forward. Here's number 1. Jesus made disciples in teams. He did it, right? 80% of what Jesus did, you look in the Gospels, really was with these other disciples, meaning he always had multiple levels of ministry that was going on, right? The story yesterday, maybe the best part of the story was with this woman, Shannon, who was blown away by it and was like, okay, I got to learn how to do this more. Maybe that was the most important thing of the whole story. Think about Jesus. This was so important to him that he spent all night praying for the specific people that he needed to have on his team. Has that ever crossed our minds to go, man, okay, maybe I should, if I'm doing this alone, I need an all-nighter praying. Jesus, would you hand select the people that you want me to be doing this with? As Jesus sought to multiply this, right? He sent them out in 12s, sent them out in 72. Whether it was 70 or 72, what we know is this, it was an even number. They went out in twos. They didn't go out alone. And just meaning, and then when they came together as a big group for celebration and sharing stories of what had happened. Man, being in community and making disciples with others was a huge part. And why do you do it in twos? I don't know. We don't know all the answers, but I got to think one of them is because when you've got a partner, when you're discouraged, you've got someone to lean on. And when you're celebrating, and he says, rejoice with those who rejoice. And it's just easier and better when you've got someone that's with you. Even think about the context of verses like John 13, 34, and 35. It says, a new command I give you, which you're thinking, okay, what's this new thing he's going to give us? You must love one another. By this, all men, you'll know you're my disciples by how you love one another. I wonder if God wants us in teams so that as people, as we're out among the lost and they see how we interact with someone else, they go, man, I wish I had a friend that would do something like that with me, that would serve together. Just our love for one another in the context of disciple making is really powerful. And then all of a sudden, the Great Commission, if you think about it in this context, takes on a whole new meaning. This is the only way the disciples had made disciples, was in community. And so when Jesus said, you're going to go do this, I don't think any of them had any image of, I'm going to go do this by themselves. Oh, this is just how you do it. Jesus had so modeled it for them that that when they went out to do this, they went and did it the same way because they caught, whether Jesus said it or not, we do this in community. So first one is, this is how Jesus did it. So we should seek to do it that way as well. Number 2, Paul made disciples in teams. You know what the most common word, you can do a study on this, the most common word after the word Paul or Apostle Paul is in the book of Acts? It's the word and. It says Paul, and he's always with somebody else. He intentionally was in community. He didn't just usually go do stuff by himself. In fact, you find stories where it's just Paul and they're rare. He was raising up people to do community with him. And you think about Acts 19, which is the one we like to teach on and cast vision, and all of Asia was heard. Can't you see how Jesus so clearly, I think the Spirit of Jesus was setting him up? Maybe Paul was even missing this a little bit. Right before that passage where they, it says they met in the hall of Tyrannus. It says Paul just bumps into these 12 guys who were disciples that had heard of John the Baptist, but not heard about Jesus yet. I just wonder if the Holy Spirit was like, okay, Paul, how can I make this as clear as I possibly can for you? Oh, here's what I'll do. I'm going to just hand deliver you. Let's make it even the number 12 to make it as simple as possible. So you've got 12 guys that you can pour into so you can get, this is what I want you to do. When Jesus was pouring in 12, I'm not saying that there's a magical number of 12, but I want you to pour into a community of people. And when you do that, and you just move from just persuading people to instead, hey, really positioning people and setting them out, then that's when breakthrough is going to happen. So Jesus modeled this in teams. Paul modeled this in teams. You're like, Jim, I already knew this stuff. Give me something original. Nope, here's something that you already knew as well. Number 3, it's a little hypocritical not to do this in teams. Now, if you're trying every way possible to do it with teams and you can't, I'm not calling you a hypocrite in that. And I'm not even saying this like to challenge you. I'm just saying, if we're casting vision to people saying, you got to get some people together, maybe even as non-believers, and start studying God's word in your house together. I'm going to teach you this way to do it. And you're not actually doing that yourself with some others. You're actually calling people to a theory, not to something that you've practically experienced yourself. And you know this, right? We multiply who we are and what we do. We don't multiply what we tell people to do, which is one of the most annoying parts about parenting. But so if you want to see groups start them on the lost, hey, you better be in a group with others doing discovery Bible study and living this out, because you're going to multiply what you're living out yourself. And you'll actually find you'll sell like starting groups and houses better because you've actually experienced the power of it yourself. So I want to say, if you're in a legacy church, this is especially important, because a legacy church, you won't naturally necessarily have that experience of what we're trying to get people to do in their homes. So this is why I've talked about in the past, like having 2 lanes. It's important that you have a group of people that are all into this thing and gathering together to live this out, so that you're smoking what you're selling, or you are modeling what you're telling people to do. So that's number 3 is whether it's hypocritical, it's you're going to have more success if you're actually experiencing it yourself. Number 4, you'll be much more likely to quit without a team. And you guys know this already, but like if you've got some people that you go prayer walking with, and then they all cancel out, how many of you have been like, I don't want to go now either? And then you don't go, right? I mean, that's just practically true. It's just easier with people. And if that's true just on the basic of like just going out one day, how much more? In fact, I've been on this call for a long time. There's a lot of people that used to be here that aren't. And a lot of them that I've journeyed with, and I've said, well, tell me about the teams that you have locally. And they're doing it on their own. And it just takes a lot more self-discipline and resiliency to do this by yourself. Right? I think one of the reasons why Jesus wanted us to do this is because it's hard. We're going to be tempted to quit. And you need other people. So in those moments when you're discouraged, they can speak life into you. And in those moments where you go, I don't have any stories that have lasted for the last 6 months, and someone else in your group shares a story, and you go, oh, wait a minute, their story's my story. Man, that's awesome. This last week, I had one Persons of Peace just kind of flop and was just really discouraged by that. And then a woman in our group shared a story, and she went on to say, you know what? I've been a Christian for a long time, and I don't have like regrets about my past, but I realize I just wasted most of my Christian life. And for the first time, I have purpose in my life. And she's someone who's like raising up lots of Spanish speakers now to be disciples and training people. And all of a sudden I was like, man, what a great Sunday. And I went into it going, man, I'm kind of discouraged, right? So people will lift up your spirits and they'll come alongside you when you're struggling. So you'll be much more likely to quit without a team. And then number 5, it's just more inspiring and fun to have others with you. Isn't that just true? That so it's kind of a positive way of saying the last one, but as you have other people with you, man, it's inspiring and encouraging, and it's not when you get together with a group that it's simply we just talk about disciple making all the time. The goal is you're coming together with these people. I mean, this is what we're selling, right? With people in homes, is that you get to go deeper with these people. You come to love them. Like maybe I try to hide it when I'm in groups, but I am not a natural hugger at all. Like I'm not a touchy-feely person at all. Handshake, high five, I'm good. But in our church, one of our values is when people walk in, they get hugged all over the place. And it's, hey. And I'm like, so I'm hugging people all over the place. But I'm growing as a person in that. And we just say anybody should walk in and they should, just by the look of other people's eyes, should feel welcomed and like they belong. I don't think I ever felt that, even when I was a pastor of my churches in the past. But man, there's a sense of like, I can't wait for Sundays when we meet in my house, because there's just this sense of that. And so it's encouraging and fun because we're in this together and we're helping form that now in other places as well. So next week, we're going to talk about some real practical ways of where you find these people to be a part of your community. And as I brainstorm this with some other leaders on this call, they just gave so many ideas that man, I can't wait to share it. And in fact, the people that you find, the people that I found that are part of our church now are ones that I never in my wildest dreams would have thought, man, these are ones that would be part of our team. And God has brought this really like eclectic group together, and it's awesome. And because they've all come together for the express purpose of loving one another and making disciples together, man, there's just this dynamic that's exciting. And as we've helped starting other groups like that, and we invite them to say, hey, come check this out for a week, see what it's like, experience it, and then we'll help you start a new one. Man, they just go, man, that's not like experience I've had before. And they're excited now to go start those as well. So we're going to break into groups. I want to give us a minute just to go. I always want to just go, any comments or questions. They can't be how questions because those are going to come next week. But or you want to give, I'm not looking for 2-minute testimonies, but if you have a 20-second testimony that backs up what I'm saying, that's fine. If you totally disagree with what I said, then just hold that to yourself. But any quick things, people, or you feel like the Spirit's put something on you want to share, and then I'll have us break into groups.
I'll share something that the thing that's really struck me was that, when I went through the Lifeway global training for DMM, their first thing after prayer is team, and they build team as the first thing that they do before access ministries and going out of the lost, because I think they understand this, that you can't do this by yourself. So I'm excited for this topic.
That's awesome. Thanks, Grace. Any other
Jim,
thoughts?
can I say something real quick?
So
first of all, I agree with everything you said. I always do, but I agree with everything you said. And I've liked you from the very beginning too. So there's that. But I just want to say that every now and then it's either do it alone or don't do it. And I just want to say 3 people dropped out on me this Saturday, and it's not the first time that's happened. And when you're alone, you're not by yourself. Jesus is with you. So I just want to say, if for whatever reason you end up by yourself, go with Jesus. It's a cool venture. So Saturday I was by myself. Sunday I was with 20,000 people at a festival. So yeah, they were both good. Anyway.
That's a good word. I can't tell you how many great stories have happened too, where like everyone flaked out on me and I went out and something still happened. So I was not trying to promote.
Good stuff.
Yeah, that's a good word, Bob.
I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's why that's in there. So
that's a good word.
I would say that you kept saying, Jim, that we already know this stuff. This stuff has been studied in sociology and places like that. So this is nothing new. So it just occurs to me, how is it that we followers of Christ seem to miss so much of this basic stuff, man? It's interesting. Yeah,
that's a good word.
I skipped building team, and yeah, that was a mistake. I was so happy to have these Gabriola Island people. It's awesome. Yeah,
that's good. Okay, so I'm excited about the next several weeks together, and hey, let's break into groups. And for sure, if not everyone in your group, you're clear on what their application has been from the Push Week series. Spend some time on that first, and then hey, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.